you everybody for coming tonight. This was a bit of a turn on a dime kind of event with the judicial redistricting being in the news and so forth. And the League of Women Voters, who I represent, had an opportunity to get together an illustrious panel of speakers to talk about that issue. It is topical, as you know. It is being debated, if you can call that, at the General Assembly today and the next few days, with 15 amendments going through the committee as we speak. So it is exciting, it is depressing, depending on your point of view. And I think with many of you being in the judiciary, you've been there. I will say there's the League of Women Voters, who I represent. I'm the Fair Elections Chair. And I have the partnership with the North Carolina Voters for Clean Elections, Melissa Crom, and she'll be moderating. And I would also need to make sure that I mention Democracy North Carolina, who is another partner of ours, have helped make sure that we have an excellent audience and some excellent panelists as well. I will also mention I'm going to savor this moment because this is going to be probably the only time in my history that the attorneys and judges are waiting on me. So they're not going to get started until I'm through.
We can start right now.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let me do this. Let me, please, I'll turn the mic to my colleague, and then we'll begin with introduction.
Why don't you introduce the panel?
Okay, please, actually, please, if you could introduce yourself to,
Sure.
I think everyone knows who this gentleman is, but let's go ahead.
I'm Richard Vinroot. I'm a lawyer here in Charlotte. I was involved in government some years ago on the city council and the mayor's office, and I've been here for 50 plus years with my wife and family and practice law. Thank you.
Set the bar very high.
I don't know. I'm tall. Maybe that's
I'm Lane Williamson. I'm also tall, but not quite as tall as Richard. I've been around quite as long, but still for quite a while. I've been in private practice for longer than I would care to think about, and was a judge briefly for a tumultuous 3 years, and that went through both an election and an appointment process, so I know something of, have firsthand experience with some of this stuff, and I have lived in Charlotte most of my life, and I guess my great claim to fame is that Reagan Miller is my classmate.
Everybody, I'm Tim Emery. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in town. I run my own practice. I started in the public defender office doing exclusively indigent criminal defense, and I now have a practice area that tries to focus on serious offenses, felony casework. I also handle a lot of matters in district court and still represent indigent clients as well as retained clients. I've never ran for office save student government in college. So.
Thank you. And then Melissa Crom.
Hi, my name's Melissa Price Crom. I'm the director of the North Carolina Voters for Clean Elections, where I've been for 7 years, where we've done good government advocacy work. Lately, we've been working on fair courts issues. And actually, one of the handouts I'll point out right now, it's right here. It's the North Carolina Tour on Judicial Independence. So there's a good handout on the kind of the history of what we've seen in our state, what has been happening ever since the demise of judicial public financing, which is a program that our organization was advocating for. And especially on the back page lately, it's just this year. So we've seen a lot of changes, and a lot of changes to the judiciary. I would be remiss if I didn't point out my amazing board member, Catherine, right here. Raise your hand, Catherine. Catherine Schwilling. Catherine Schwilling. And this would not have happened without her, because she is my editor. So thank you very much. But I'm a lobbyist. I'm a good government lobbyist. And we've seen a lot of interesting changes to the judiciary this year. So we're going to try to talk today about, why judicial independence is important, why our fair courts are incredibly important, to answer that question, and really think about, when we see changes like the ones that have been coming up as of late, what it means to the judiciary and what it means to everyday folks. So I'm going to start off with the panel. First question is, I want you to think about your own positive vision for the courts. What does life in your state look like when the courts are fair and independent? Right here.
Well, it's so obvious, I'm not sure it needs an explanation. I mean, we all run the risk of us or our families appearing in a court, and whether you're a lawyer or a client, you take seriously the courts and the judgments that they render, and the last thing you want is anybody who doesn't give you a fair shake in court. Now, as lawyers, we come in there wanting a fair shake in terms of victory for our client, but at the end of the day, what we really want is a fair and unbiased view of our case by peers who make a decision, and by judges oftentimes that make decisions before it gets to our peers. It's just so fundamental to American life that we want a fair and unbiased court system that I'm not sure I can elaborate any further to make the point any better.
Well, I would say there's a common sort of analogy that Chief Justice Roberts has used, that judges are umpires, they're not players. And it's like if you were in a baseball game, if the home team could pick the umpire, you would not really be happy about that if you're the visiting team. And so what you're really looking for is somebody who's going to fairly apply the law, as we say, call balls and strikes as you see them, and not make up the rules, just to enforce the rules. And that's fundamentally different from both of the other branches of government, where ideology is the important thing. I've made the analogy, and I have to confess, I've said this before, because of my experience, I'm pretty much a total cynic when it comes to politics in general, that you would pick probably a drooling troglodyte with a double-digit IQ over a real statesman if that person supported your ideology. You do not want that in a judge. Nobody wants that in a judge. That's the only branch of government where the ideology and party affiliation is the least important attribute and the least predictor of how good a judge will be. And there's inherently a tension in how we pick judges, whether it's by election or by appointment. Judges are drawn into the political process. And that's where the danger is. And that's where it can compromise your judicial independence if you are thinking that you have to be responsive to a voting public and the whim of the majority when you may be called upon to make an unpopular decision. So to be able to do that is fundamental to really, well, think about if you had a baseball game without an umpire. It'd be pretty ugly. So that's the important function.
Tim?
Yeah, nobody's perfect, right? And we're, judges are people. And we all have our own internal biases. And the last thing I want is additional pressures put on my judge who's going to decide my client's fate. I don't want them thinking about X issues. And Lane spoke to it. The partisan, the adding of the partisan affiliation, party affiliation to the election of district court and superior court judges is troubling to me, because judges at the district court level in North Carolina, they aren't deciding Roe versus Wade. They aren't deciding these inherently political questions. In full transparency, I am a Democrat. I happen to know a lot of district court judges who I think do an excellent job, and they happen to be Republicans. I have also seen some judges that I think are kind of lousy judges who happen to be Democrats. The skills that make a good judge have very little to do with that. At its core, district court is dealing with people and listening to people and treating people fairly as they would want to be treated, regardless of if my client's wearing a suit or they're wearing clothes that they slept in last night because they live under an underpass. And it's hard to put those things aside. And I don't want additional pressures put on my judges that make those calls even more difficult.
And if I could respond to something Tim said, it's really been distressing to me in recent years with the increasing partisanship in in both how judges are elected and how they are appointed. I'm an independent. I could not run and be elected as a judge. There is no way, because even before they were explicitly partisan, you would have to be on somebody's list, the conservatives, the progressive list, whatever it is. And if you think about it, what is the attribute of a judge that you really want? You want them to be non-ideological and independent, but particularly in recent years, it's just become more partisan, and nobody who is truly independent with that label could even be elected, or I would say even be appointed these days, because it's still, party affiliation is still almost a prerequisite for whomever is appointed.
I'm old, so I know things maybe some of you, all you young people don't know, but we've always been partisan about judges, and I must tell you that. Since Reconstruction, this has been a Democratic state, big D, Democratic state until in the courts at least, until Governor Martin was governor. He appointed 3 people to the Supreme Court who were Republican lawyers, and all 3 were promptly defeated in the next election, not because they were bad judges, but because they were Republican judges. I came to Charlotte, wanted to register as a Republican, and had the registrar essentially tell me what an idiot I was for wanting to register as a Republican in a Democratic community, in a Democratic state. And I said, well, I think I'm going to do it anyway, so I did. We had elections when I came to Charlotte, statewide elections for Superior Court judges, and all you had to do was pull a D or an R lever across the state. Across the state, we were electing local judges statewide in a Democratic state that was about 2-1. Republicans began to win elections only maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And they won them for interesting reasons. I think some analysis was done. People began to think that R meant put people in jail. We had drug problems, we had criminal problems, and people thought Republican judges were tougher on crime. So they voted with their eyes. When they got down the ballot, they'd still vote for a Democratic governor, Jim Hunt, whoever. But when they got down to the judges, a lot of folks didn't vote at all. They didn't know who they were, and they would vote R because they thought that would be somebody who's tougher on crime. We've gotten into this, politics is a terrible thing in judges' idea, and I don't disagree with anything that I've heard so far, but I just want you to know that this is not a new thing. It's only new now because for 6 years, since 2010, Republicans have, for the first time in 100 years, controlled both houses of the legislature with veto-proof majorities. That's a bad thing, incidentally, because they are, in many ways, going crazy and doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. But the truth is, we're really hypocritical about that, because they have memories too, and they realize the Democrats in the legislature pretty much treated them the same way when they were in the minority. And so while it's not right, it is somewhat understandable. That's just a fact. I don't know, I'm agreeing with everything you said about it. It doesn't make sense, to me at least, to elect judges, but we started doing that back in the 1800s. And we did it because I think the people in this state knew that if you did that, the people that would elect them would be of the party in control. Now things are more competitive, and it's become a much more debated subject.
There is a kind of an interesting sort of historical note about that. The first Constitution in North Carolina provided for the appointment by the legislature, and they would be served
life tenure
with
good behavior.
Good behavior, and you had to be a Protestant. At that time, you had to be a Protestant to hold public office. It was not until 1868, correct?
That's absolutely right.
Started.
It was debated then. My law.
You were there?
No. Let me tell you, not quite. My senior law partner, Russell Robinson's grandfather, was a man named William Rodman, and he's the one that argued for the appointed process as opposed to the election process.
Yeah, and there was a debate about it.
Yeah, there was.
Well,
we digress.
It's actually really funny, they don't know this, but they're actually going along with the questions that I was planning on asking anyway. So we're going to continue the conversation about the history of judicial selection in our state and kind of why it matters. I think that's important to have a history and understanding how we got to where we were. So continue.
I think that your point is great, but my thought is this tit for tat, you know, what does it accomplish? And I want to get to the right answer. Maybe I'm just a blind-eyed idealist, but I want to get to the right answer. And so, okay, you did this to us, we're going to do that, you know, eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. You know, we did a good job. I think we're doing a good job in Mecklenburg County. If you look at the breakdown of district court by gender diverse, we're ethnically diverse, we're party affiliation diverse. You know, we're doing a good job, I think, in Mecklenburg County of electing judges with a variety of backgrounds and pedigrees and experiences. And it's interesting that it's the metro, look, it is a tit for tat. It's hey, let's go back to this so we can get more, we can win more seats. This is going to be good in the end game for Republicans in the state. But we've got a problem in large cities because an R isn't necessarily a winning letter in Mecklenburg County. And so let's create racially gerrymandered districts to ensure that we get our cut, you know. But they aren't dividing districts. They aren't trying to divide districts in more rural, Republican-dominated areas, right? And it just seems anathema to democracy and to the sanctity of the vote and to free and fair and honest elections. And we are not so big. We're not New York, right? We don't have 5 boroughs. We don't have 5 different courtrooms in Mecklenburg County. We have 1 courtroom. We have 1 courthouse. And why does it, you know, a Huntersville judge versus a Center City judge versus a Matthews judge? It's Mecklenburg County, you know? And I don't understand the logic for the map, short of we want to ensure that we can get some R judges.
All right, so we're talking about House Bill 717. This is the legislation that's being proposed right now in the House that changes the trial court districts. And there's some pretty big changes here in Mecklenburg County. So I want to pose a question about, you know, why does this judicial redistricting, or why does it matter to everyday people? How does it affect the everyday people here in Mecklenburg County?
You know, I think a good answer to that is to note that there is a phalanx of district court judges sitting here who would be affected by dividing it into 5 districts. And I would be interested to hear the opinion of perhaps one of them, perhaps even the chief district judge, as to the general feeling about this. And the proposal is to divide up Mecklenburg County, I think, into 5 sub-districts.
Well, it's just 2 now.
Well, it was 5.
Yeah, I know, but then now they've narrowed it down to 2.
Okay.
And, all right, so yes, I am the Chief District Court Judge. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I am the Chief District Court Judge here in Mecklenburg County. And I have a very special interest in what's going on here because over the years, and I think if they were going down history, they would have talked about the fact that there was a period of time when we went to nonpartisan elections for judges at all levels: Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, District Court, Superior Court. I always put Superior Court on the bottom because that's just me. And let's see, a Superior Court judge.
Yeah.
And they know how much I love them. And the description of the diversity of our bench is a result of those nonpartisan elections, particularly in this county. And as a Chief District Court Judge, my interest, you know, for the public is that we have an experienced, competent bench, and that they work as a team. Because when one judge is out, we have to have another judge fill in. When one judge doesn't have the answer to a legal question, he can ask another judge. And there's this collegiality that we built over the years with each other. And what's happened here, the proposal right now is that this county be divided into 2 districts. And just frankly, what they divide into is a predominantly Democratic district, about 75% of the latest poll, and a Republican district which stretches from Lake Norman, comes all the way around the western part of the county, Steel Creek and those areas, and it goes down and picks up Blakeney, and then goes back around, and I think it stops in Matthews, I think, is what it gets out on the eastern part. But it's contiguous, it goes all the way around, it's a big city, it's a big city. And then in the middle is where they're saying it's 26A. In addition to that, we went back to partisanship. You know, there's going to be an R after your name if you run for a district court judge seat or even a superior court judge seat in the coming elections. And I will tell you, the immediate consequence of that has been to divide us judges into our camps. You know, and the proposal, not only did they, you know, divide us into the district, which actually, you know, from a very a personal standpoint, no, I don't mind running for my seat in a smaller geographical area. You know, that's fine. And because of where I live, I'm assigned to the primarily Democratic district, and I'm a Democrat. You know, don't have much to worry about there. However, what they have done is said in the 2018 race, in that district, which is 26A, there will only be 4 seats on the ballot. There are 6 incumbents living in that district. So we have to run against each other to keep our seats. Has nothing to do with competency, has nothing to do with, you know, we don't know the law or anything like that, or we're bad judges or anything like that. We are going to have to go tell one of our colleagues, I'm running against you in order to retain my seat. Meanwhile, in the 26B district, which is, you know, predominantly white and Republican, there are going to be 5 seats on the ballot. And there are only 3 judges living over there. Is that right? Yeah. Is it 3 now, or was it 3 before? I can't keep it in mind.
4 as of this morning.
It's 4 as of this morning because, and I'll explain this, it was 3 before, and then somebody sent out an email saying, hey, look at this configuration, and sent an email to a particular judge that said, it is odd, you're a Republican, and you've been assigned to the 26A district, you know. And today, at the committee hearing, an amendment was made. And the district that he is in was now added to 26B. So now we have 4 judges running for 5 seats. And you know, and I've proposed a simple fix for that, is to move one of those seats over to 25A, and then we don't have to run against each other. But they won't do that. They haven't done that yet.
Well, to put
Yes.
also some additional historical context in that there's, the concept of judicial subdistricts is not new. Judge Evans back there, the Superior Court judge, is in one of the 3 Superior Court sub-districts that have existed since, what, the 60s?
80s.
When?
1987.
The 70s?
It was 1987 Alexander versus Martin that created it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It seems long ago.
But for a long time, and actually doing that ensured that there could be minority representation on the Superior Court bench. So it can flow both ways, and I think the point is that it's all gerrymandering for some purpose.
And can I add to that? The reason those Superior Court districts were created the way they have been here in Mecklenburg County was because we went from the statewide election of Superior Court judges to a system of electing them locally. And in doing that, there was a lawsuit going on under the Voting Rights Act. And the resolution of that, sort of the fix of it was, oh, we're going to create a majority-minority district, particularly in the urban counties, so that a black citizen can have a voice in who gets on the bench. Because otherwise, you're going to be a minority and you're just not going to have the opportunity. I guess that's kind of racist if we think all the white people are going to vote for white people, but that's just the way things were being done. And there were very few, if any, blacks on the Superior Court bench at the time that resolution came about. Is that right, Judge Evans? Yeah. So that's why that was created, and it was a remedy for a problem. A problem that everybody noticed and everybody said. So I would suggest to you that this current effort is not remedying any problem. We're fine. We've been fine.
It is creating new problems, and the thing that Judge Miller explained, that the one judge that's being sort of batted around, with the map, you know what? He's a good judge, and he is smart, and he is competent. And if I walk in and I have a case for trial, and I see that judge is there, I am happy. And I voted for him, and I would continue to vote for him. And he's a Republican, but he's a good judge. I want good judges. And now I will say, on the flip side, there is no perfect fix. The electorate is uninformed, generally. And we've seen we've seen some really bad cases of that with judicial elections. We got some judges that are thankfully no longer judges, and they were terrible judges, and they got elected because of name recognition or because of what have you, and they were disasters. And appointment isn't the solution either. I come from a state, Nebraska, that there is no such thing as election of judges. And if you think that that's above, undue pressure, you're kidding yourself. The tough political questions are the ones without clean answers, right? If it's 2 + 2, we can all say 4 and then go home, right? But this is not a 2 + 2 question, unfortunately. It's a difficult question, but I think we are solving a problem that doesn't really exist right now, and we're creating additional problems.
I don't mean to be contrarian, but we're cursing the darkness right now.
Yeah.
Look, gerrymandering is not something that the Republicans invented in this state. I was with Governor Hunt last night, and a room full of people, half Republican, half Democrat. He just said, I want to confess, we gerrymandered the dickens out of this state so we could have a strong majority in the legislature since I was a young man. And now you are doing it to us, and it doesn't feel very good. I just want you to know this is not something the Republicans invented. And I'm with you guys. At least I frankly don't understand, to my own way of thinking, maybe why we elect judges. And I certainly don't understand why there ought to be a partisan judge. But it is what it is. And don't be surprised that Republicans, having had Democrats draw these lines 50 or 60 years ago, now that they're in charge for 6 years, are looking at the lines. And don't look at every line as if it was a line drawn in heaven and it shouldn't be tinkered with, because they weren't drawn in heaven. They were drawn by a different majority with a different view of things. And your point about, well, we should all do the right thing, well, I agree with that. But I went down with Governor Martin last summer to talk to the leaders in the legislature about going to a nonpartisan redistricting commission. And they said in a sort of jocular way to Jim and me, we'll do it one day. It's the right thing. We were all championing it when we were in the minority, and the Democrats wouldn't listen to us. We'll do it one day, but we want to give them about 20 or 25 years of their own medicine, and then we'll consider doing it. So that's not the right answer, but it is how they feel, and we simply can't sit here and curse that idea as if it's somehow unholy, and what we were defending is something very holy. What we are defending is not holy. There were some good things done to help minority judges get elected. That's a great thing. We ought not to change that. But those lines, the lines across the state ought to be looked at every now and then. I don't know that they're all right or all fair, but they ought to be looked at. And if they did nothing more than look at it and bring in a lot of lawyers and judges to talk about distances to court and various other reasons why.
But that's what they're not doing.
Well, I hear you, but they're new at it. They're not perfect legislators yet. They're new at it. So maybe they'll learn.
Well,
They will convince them.
I really do, I want to change it around a little bit. I think there is the Republican and Democratic divide, but there is also a lot of hostility just between branches.
Yeah.
There is a
I
legislature
agree.
versus judiciary.
Oh, I agree.
And I have sort of an inside with the state bar, and I know that basically there's a lot of members of the legislature that hate lawyers and hate the judiciary and are trying to starve it.
I'm so surprised.
So let's continue this conversation, because we have a question from the audience. Let's debate the pros and cons of electing judges, a merit selection, what I think the Senate's proposing of the legislative appointment system. Let's talk about that. What do you guys think about those different types of judicial selection methods?
I think I was at one point in favor of gubernatorial appointments at certain levels, the higher courts, and some appointed process below that, but I don't think that's workable. And I think I come down right now in favor of electing judges. I also, not sure I agree with the R and the D on them, but in fairness, it is more information than nothing. The judges can't tell you anything about what they'll do or what their philosophy is. So, and frankly, I don't know how average citizens, not that lawyers or anything, but average citizens practicing law, would ever know who to vote for a judge unless somebody told them something about that man or that woman. So
Well, most lawyers don't know.
No, I agree. It's a very difficult question. I don't know the answer. To many things, I don't know the answer.
Well, I'm on record as having published an article in which I say that they all suck as ways to pick judges. And that sounds kind of flippant, and it is sort of snarky, but I really don't think there is a good way. And the reason is that however you do it, it's going to draw people in, it makes them politicians. If you think that being a candidate for a federal judgeship, is that not political? That is the most political thing going. I mean, just look at Merrick Garland, Neil Gorsuch, in the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats making fools of themselves in that process. You have to be a politician either way, and judges, for the most part, don't like that. I do think that probably appointing judges is better at keeping out the true clunkers. I think there is something in that process that you're at least going to get somebody who's minimally qualified. You're not going to get somebody elected simply because they have the same name as a department store, say. It eliminates that sort of thing. On the other hand, merit selection, and we have a version of that, but only a small bit. Judge Hewitt here, filling an opening, we had a bar election, submitted 5 names to the governor. Any of the 5 would have been good. She was the top vote getter among the bar, and she was appointed. That was a really good appointment, but she's got to run the next time and will face the same sort of vicissitudes that they all do. And but the merit selection does have, you know, you would, the analogy people say is, do you want people electing, you know, the chief surgeon in the hospital? It's sort of like electing judges. No. But on the other hand, merit selection has the air of, okay, some smaller group knows who should be judges, and you leave out the public participation. And that's undemocratic with the small d, so I really don't know. I think we're lucky to get as good judges as we do, and whatever system we have is going to be imperfect.
And Tim, before I go to you, let me first explain this. If we did move from the election of judges to merit selection or legislative appointment, This is something by our Constitution that would have to go in front of the voters. I just want to make that clear first.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah,
The election's constitutional now.
the challenge with merit is who is the decider of who has merit, you know? And we look at systems of power and control, and typically when you have appointments or merits, it's the people, it's a closed circuit, right? It's those people that are in those systems of power and control in a society that determine what is meritorious and what isn't. And when you look at the history of judicial decisions in the United States, and you look at the worst decisions, and you look at the best decisions. The worst decisions, you had judges that were reflecting kind of the views of the society at the time. Korematsu, we legitimized the internment of Japanese Americans simply because of their where their parents came from. You look at Plessy versus Ferguson. And you look at the most courageous decisions, Brown v. Board of Education. Horribly unpopular. Horribly unpopular. And that flies in the face of my comment that district court judges and superior court judges aren't deciding these landmark civil rights issues. But I think that being the judicial branch requires sometimes the unpopular but correct decision to uphold the law, to pursue the greater aims of the law. And if we have a system that doesn't have judges that are willing to sort of make those tough decisions, we're all going to suffer, you know? And those decisions in an everyday, you know, a question was asked, why should the general public care? How many people in Charlotte haven't had to go to court for a traffic ticket or to go for a child custody issue or to go for a contested divorce or to go for have been involved in some type of domestic violence issue? And then you ask, what percentage of the people of Charlotte don't know someone who's had to go to court for one of those things? And I think you ask that question and the answer is zero, you know, unless if somebody's just a hermit, doesn't have any friends. So it's these micro decisions. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's these micro decisions that require a judge to be as free as possible from these things. Am I going to get reappointed by the merit board? You know, if I have some cases right now, right? What's the most controversial thing that's happened in Charlotte in the last 5 years? Well, what happened a year ago uptown? Okay, some call it a riot, some call it a protest, whatever you want to call it. I represent some people that were charged with crimes from what happened that night. And I do not want a judge who is going to have to answer to a political person if they acquit my client of something. You know, that's scary to me.
Can I mention one other thing I was going to mention, particularly pernicious about elections, and it's a recent development, and that's PAC money. And particularly in appellate races, I doubt that that's really had an effect down at the trial court level, but we've seen, I remember several years ago, that ad with the hillbilly banjo players, you know, and up a fire. It was so embarrassing. And the candidate can't have anything to do with that. And in fact, there have been attack ads that candidates have disavowed, you know, that were for them, and that is A, degrading to the process, and B, really unfair to the candidates to have someone else supposedly advocating for you for less than honorable reasons. They want to elect you because of, that one issue they're interested in, be it redistricting or whatever. But the PAC money thing, I think, is a real problem that could be dealt with if anybody had the courage to do that. But that would require legislative courage, which is always there.
Mr. Williams is speaking of the Citizens United decision, and yes, that started bringing in a multitude of money to our state for Supreme Court races. We're talking about the banjo ad, I think that started in 2012 for Justice Newby. So I think that's a good question, because up until 2013 we had a program called Judicial Public Financing, and so many people in my field of fair courts kind of debate this, because it's like, well, with Citizens United, public financing is a challenge. So would it be better to go to a merit selection proposal, because that, at least cuts out the money? Many people in return argue, well, merit selection has its difficulties, because who chooses merit? And then we've seen, state by state, merit selection tends to not bring forth the most diverse judges. So right now Senate is debating this concept right now of whether or not we should allow the voters to, be asked the question. And the question is, I think there's some, they don't know, I don't think they know exactly what they're going to put on the ballot right now, but right now I think the proposal is what's called the Virginia plan, which is legislators appoint and reappoint. So I want to kind of throw that out there, because you have different forms of merit selection, and then you have what is being proposed, which I don't consider merit selection, that's being talked about in the Senate right now, which is legislative appointment and reappointment. Can we talk about the difference between those two, and if we were given the choice between merit selection and legislative appointment, how that would work and how that would affect the people of North Carolina?
Quickly don't know enough about it to make any intelligent comments, but the very idea of a legislature electing judges offends me greatly. I just don't think I want that ever, either the Democratic legislature or the Republican. I've seen those guys in action. I've seen how they seriously, I would not trust, they're not that you have to be lawyers to make that decision, but they're just a bunch of folks from all over the place. Yeah. Their ideas are not unlike this bill that we're now talking about. They're in some ways cockeyed, and I don't want them making judge decisions. I'd much rather have a local community draw it. I hope the lines are fair, and I hope they make some sense, but that's where I think it ought to be done. I never liked the idea, I got to tell you, of the whole state electing a judge in Mecklenburg County by pulling a big D either. So I want the more local those decisions are for me, the better.
I agree with Richard. I think the group of people that I least want choosing judges is the legislature. I once had a law school professor who said something to the effect that no one is safe while the General Assembly is in session. And that has always been true, whether it's controlled by Democrats or Republicans. And you've seen recently, we've had, and I was one of these, a special Superior Court judge that was appointed by the governor, and the General Assembly has pretty much done away with that, except for business court judges. But if you gave them the power to appoint judges, I cannot imagine anything worse.
I don't know if it was worse from, as we talked about earlier, 1776 to 1868.
Well, that's what they did.
No, and John, no offense taken. You are a legislator. I just don't think people in the General Assembly, with all the things they do, are in a position to pick judges in Mecklenburg County or any other county.
Well, of course, one thing about that was when judges were part-time. And yeah, we did away with that in 1868. It was debated, this same debate was in 1868. They debated having the legislature appoint them, having the governor appoint them with the consent of the legislature, or to do it by popular election. And popular election is what we've had, for the most part, ever since.
And you mentioned part-time, I mean, our legislators are part-time, right? They have careers, they have their own jobs, and let's be frank. person who is proposing this dicing up of, and I still don't understand, but for, we want to ensure that some Republican judges get elected. I don't understand the logic of dividing Mecklenburg County into 2 districts. I just don't, in this day and age. But that person who's proposing that bill, he's a bail bondsman.
He's a bail bondsman
So if-
for his family.
Yeah.
He's not a college graduate.
So, well, I'm not going to disparage non-college graduates, but I will disparage bail bondsmen. There is a growing movement in this country to reform to end money bail. The idea that my clients who can pay $10,000 bond being less dangerous, charged with the identical crime as a client who can't pay that bond is nonsensical. And obviously, he does not want that practice to end, right? His livelihood depends on that practice. So I could imagine, if I'm a bail bondsman, I would want judges that are gonna that are not gonna release people on their own recognizance, that are gonna set cash bonds, they're gonna set bonds, they're gonna set high secured bonds, so that I can get the bucks. You know, and it's those sorts of practical considerations that I know that I'm being idealistic, I'm guilty as charged, but we've got to try and eliminate those sorts of considerations as much as possible. We'll never be able to totally eliminate them, but that doesn't mean we don't give up.
And I'm not sure we answered your question about merit selection, is that if we do have it, how would, what would be the best way to do it? It would certainly not be the legislature. I would say, I think Richard was talking about this, it would be, whoever it is, it shouldn't be just lawyers. It should be a cross-section of people with local participation, and and it should be transparent and all of that good stuff that we look for, so that people would have confidence in that. So,
Yeah, there was actually another proposal about merit selection. I'm sorry, and it's called the Missouri Plan.
Yes.
Anybody? You want to explain that?
No, I don't.
All right, so the Missouri Plan is a merit selection process that starts with a commission. And the commission, and this is, in some cases, it could be the Bar Association, but we don't, that's not going to happen here. So there's a commission that's put together, and it's various people, lawyers, non-lawyers, members of the legislature, whomever, are on this commission, and anyone, any citizen can nominate someone who's qualified, under our statutes about the qualifications of judges, to go through this merit selection process. And once you get nominated, this commission evaluates your qualifications and rates you as not qualified, qualified, highly qualified. And actually there's some variations within that. Then those people are then submitted to the legislature. I think that's the proposal we want to make, that we're thinking about, to the legislature, and then the legislature selects a slate of a varying number. It could be 5 people, it could be 3 people, and those names are submitted to the governor for appointment. And then after you're appointed, for whatever the term is, it could be a 4-year term, a 6-year term, whatever, you go up for a retention election where the citizens get to decide whether or not you should stay on the bench or whether or not someone else should be nominated and go through that whole selection process again.
Thank you.
well, that would require, again, changing our constitution.
Yes.
We had a decision, you can't do retention elections. And I think there are, I don't like the concept of retention elections, because that opens up a judge to a small but vocal interest group just attacking that particular judge. And that's actually happened here in a couple of district court races. But if you had a retention election, you could have people stirred up against the judge for really spurious reasons. I don't like that.
And so for merit selection, every state has some of them have similar versions of it, and others have slightly different versions of it. So there's ways that you can tinker with a merit selection plan that fits the contours of your state. So we're going to go to some questions from the audience, if that's okay. And if you have anyone else that has more questions, please send them up. We're going to go back to House Bill 717. When it comes to judicial redistricting, there are objective criteria that could be followed in a nonpartisan process. Is there any objective criteria that describes judicial independence? This criteria question is actually brought up in committee today. We don't know what criteria they use for these maps. So what criteria would describe judicial independence?
I don't know that seems to be two different things.
Yeah.
I think on 717, to do it right, there are factors that you can look at. I mean, you can look at population, caseload, all those sorts of things. And I don't disagree that probably all that needs to be looked at in terms of the judicial districts that we have. But it's just like with any redistricting, you do it in a way that's, quote, nonpartisan or close to it, or do you allow gerrymandering? But, there are certainly factors that could go into it that are legitimate, that really need to be looked at in terms of judicial resources and putting them where they belong. Like Mecklenburg has had much greater growth than most areas, and as a result of redistricting, we should have more judges. I mean, than we do. And if we do, if we get more, that's a good thing. But judicial independence, I think we've already talked about all of those factors. The main thing is simply to not have to worry about public perception of what you do. The best way to do that is to be a federal Article III judge for life. But I don't think we're going to go there.
Anybody else?
Yeah, after that.
All right. So here's a question. We're talking about criteria in these maps. So we're moving from whole counties, which especially for district court in many of these maps, and breaking them up a little bit. How does that impact the courthouse? How does that impact everyday life when we have these kind of districts start to draw on versus what we've had before, which in many cases, except for a few urban areas, we've had superior court districts, but now we're looking at district court districts being cut up. How does that affect individual counties? How does that affect the access to justice? What does that mean for local people?
The best I can articulate in terms of why you would want to divide a county is to ensure that the judges are drawn from different parts of the county. That's the best argument that I can conceive of for that. But I don't understand why that matters, to be quite honest. I've been in front of judges and said, I didn't get a fair shake. I've been in front of judges saying, I got a fair shake, but I lost or I won. And I've never thought about, where does that judge live in the county? It doesn't register. It doesn't, did they have Mexican or Chinese for lunch? I don't care. That's not something that I think about. And so so when we look at criteria for dividing the county, my first question that I will not give up on is, why do we need to divide the county?
Well, you don't have there are a couple of counties. I guess Guilford County actually has two courthouses, one in High Point.
That would make sense, right?
It's actually, I think, maybe the flip side of what they're doing is a question to be asked, which is, in multi-county districts, they're providing, say, I think one example is the district that's Burke and Caldwell County. I think maybe they still have two Superior Court judges, but they're going to provide, one has to be from Burke, one has to be from Caldwell. And, I can see some logic there, because Caldwell's probably going to lose out to Burke every time. So that could be a good thing, but in terms of dividing up district court seats in Tri-County, I cannot see any justification for it, really.
Well, is there a better way that we could be going about judicial redistricting? I know we need to do it, we haven't done it in quite some time. Is there a better process that we?
Yeah, I think we ought to bring in the right, I'll say this to John, you, the legislature, ought to bring in the right people to talk to you about the lines in the state. And that would be judges, might be some lawyers, but it would be,
AOC in particular.
yeah, the courts commission. There are bodies in this state who ought to bring real intelligence to the process. But if you stop at the wall of the legislature and let those men and women there decide it, that they just don't have any more knowledge about the courts than pick 5 guys off the street and say, divide the courts up. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I think there are intelligent people in this state who are studying the courts, watching how they work and the resources that are devoted to them and the demands on the judges' times all over this state, and you ought to bring in those intelligent people and have them help you draw the lines. That would make a lot of sense. And there's no magic to a judge within a county. I mean, I think there are communities of interest that cross county lines that ought to be respected. And so I'm not wedded to all of it within one county and all of it within another county. But I do think they're bright. This is too important. The courts are, for all the reasons we've said, much too important to play politics. And we just got to figure out a way to do that in a fair way. But I'm going to say as I leave this room, don't sit here tonight as if this is all something just started by these guys up there and this hadn't been done. It's been done for a century or more. And it's just that a different crowd's in charge. And I've said to a lot of people that quarrel with me as a Republican about how these guys are doing such a bad job. I said, well, wait a minute. They've only been doing it for a few years. A lot of them are acting like idiots. But I can promise you that some of your guys did too and got better at it probably. We'll get better. But they're in charge right now, and that is just the fact.
So there is.
I really don't have anything to add to what Richard said. I agree with all that.
There is a bill, House Bill 124, which is a study commission that's got bipartisan support, and that would open the door to some more time to study these districts and some more input. And it would also, we're 7, 8 years into the census count. It would allow us to get to the 2020 census count and get accurate new numbers. I mean, a lot of things have changed in our state. A lot of people have moved and changed in our state in the last 7 or 8 years. And I do think that getting fresh data would be important to this. When we did the Bell Commission, from what I've heard in committee, this wasn't around then, but we took.
You might need to explain what that is.
The Bell Commission. So the Bell Commission was the last time we drew these lines. It was how we unified the court system, in short. And it took us like almost 3 years to go through this process. And I feel like this is a very important process, and we should be taking our time with it. And this is why our coalition supports House Bill 124 as a good compromise and a way to slow down and take our time and have the good input from everybody.
Well, don't panic. I suspect that's what will happen. I suspect there's been an awful lot of immediate reaction to this fellow over in Albemarle who's proposed all these things, and he's got a committee to support him so far in one house. I wouldn't bank on that becoming the law. I wouldn't bank on that.
So was that part of the discussion, as you said in the committee, does anybody know that?
Well, they know that. It's been discussed, and some of the same people who are in the Judicial Redistricting Committee supported it, but then Representative Burr, threw out his maps on a Sunday night in June, and suddenly we were thrown into a hustle of, okay, new maps. And so that's the way the House is going right now with House Bill 717. I think there's some serious questions about whether or not the Senate plans on taking up these new maps. And we've discussed the Senate has their own proposal for how we elect judges. They're looking at this potential constitutional amendment for legislative appointment. And from what I hear from being a lobbyist is that they're kind of running on parallel tracks right now. And there's no understanding that either one is going to pass both houses immediately. So I would encourage you to go and talk to your legislators and let them know how you feel about these issues. And if anybody is interested in maybe voicing out, coming into the legislature, I'd be happy to introduce you to people, writing an op-ed, I'd be happy to work with you on that. And I'll give final thoughts to our panelists.
I probably talk too much. I don't know that it. I don't know that it does any good to. I don't know this fellow over in Albemarle. I don't know anything about him, but these people are human beings, and it doesn't do any good to tell them what idiots they are. Yeah, some of the things they're doing are idiotic, but we need to find a way to talk to people who don't see things the way we do and talk to them in a fair way. I said last night to a group of people I was telling you about up in Durham, there was an article written in the Sunday New York Times. I don't get it, but my daughter sent it to me, and it was said The Dying Art of Disagreement. It was written by a guy named Bret Stephens, who's a Republican conservative columnist that I used to read a lot in the Wall Street Journal, which I read pretty religiously because it's conservative, and I like that. But he wrote an article and talked about we don't talk to each other. We make moral, somehow because you have a D, that's a moral judgment. It's not. You just see things a little differently. We all love our country. We all love our state and our children. We all want the same things. We do have different means of getting there. We have different views about that. I don't want to go on too long, but I was just sitting in my coach Dean Smith's office many years ago. I'm a lawyer, and I was handling a case for several of our players who were pros whose money had been mishandled. And that day, Coach Bob Knight at Indiana had thrown a chair and gotten in the press, and I said, what an idiot, what a jerk. And Coach Smith, and Bob Knight, incidentally, is a very conservative Republican. He's a big supporter of Donald Trump. Coach Smith was a very liberal Democrat, and he's one of the people that I admire most in my life. And Coach Smith jumped on me about criticizing Bob Knight, whom I didn't know. He said, Richard, if you knew that man, if you knew how good he is to his kids, and if you knew how good he is about doing things the right way and no cheating and all of he takes care of his kids, you would like him a lot. He said, he's one of the people I admire most in our profession. So you just don't know him. If you knew him, you'd think differently. These people are not, that see things differently are not somehow bad people because they see things differently. They just see things differently. And we need to talk to each other as if you can be converted. And that article went on to say, the dying art of disagreement. It was pretty blunt. It said, when you're talking to somebody and you know you're from different sides of the political spectrum, shut up, listen, consider what she said as if she's right, and then respond. But don't just blurt out or turn them off because they came from a different party or a different viewpoint. That's just what's wrong with America right now. It's not working.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, I agree with that as a Platonic ideal. As I said at the beginning, it's really from my personal experience. I am, and I'm not proud of it, really cynical. And I don't see it happen. I wish it would. The thing that I wish that more of the decision-making be done by people who actually have experience with the courts and less of it being done in the General Assembly. The more it shifts away from the General Assembly to people who know what they're talking about, the better result it will be.
I really appreciate what you said and agree with it. I think that we have a real problem in our society with empathy right now, and in understanding people that maybe we don't agree with, that have different life experiences. And I do a lot of work in the anti-racist movement, and the hardest work there, but something that I'm really committed to, is trying to have dialogue with people that don't agree with me. And I have to be willing to have that talk, because if I'm just talking to everyone who already agrees with me, we're just bouncing back and forth, and we're just reassuring each other in the rightness of our views. And I want to grow the tent, and I believe that I'm right on a lot of these issues. That it comes off as arrogant, but I mean, it's important to have those conversations and to listen. And maybe I'll learn something from them, and hopefully they'll learn something from me. And I think that we underestimate the ability of an individual voter, an individual citizen, to impact change. I listened to a podcast about how a college student led to the ratification of the amendment that says Congress can't vote themselves raises. It was a college student, a sophomore in college at University of Texas that got the ball rolling and reinvigorated this 200-year-old proposal. It was amazing. And we can call our elected representatives and try and talk to them and try and engage them, and pressure helps. If they know that, you know, there's a lot of citizens who are aware of this issue and they're concerned and they have a strong opinion, if the pain of voting for it, I think maybe some legislators might fear a reprisal if they don't vote for a particular thing, but if the pain of voting for it is more painful than the pain of voting against it, meaning the pain the voters will enact on them, then I think they vote against it. And that's, we've got to try. I probably will be, I have a cynical streak in me just like Judge Williamson, and I'll probably be there shortly, but you have to give it.
It grows as you get older.
And if we don't pick up the phone and try and impart our opinion and make that elected representative know that we're watching, then they certainly won't know we're watching.
I think we have one more question. Did you have a question?
I didn't want to block it, but this is just an ordinary citizen question, because I really want to know in the meantime, because it seems like these maps may never get redrawn or whatever, what do we do as ordinary citizens, what do we need to think about? I mean, is what's going on so bad that, well, that's my question.
Well, it's too early to tell. I mean, this all started and we're acting like the whole world's falling apart. This has just started in a committee in the legislature. It's not, the ballgame's not over yet. So yeah, I'd absolutely communicate with your legislators and tell them what you think and tell them why you think this is wrong. But do it in a thoughtful way, not in a condemning way. I just finished reading a book by John Marshall, great Chief Justice. Thomas Jefferson, the guy who drew the documents that we revere, tried to pervert that court early in its history to get his way of thinking followed. There were politics, even on Thomas Jefferson's part, believe it or not, the guy that we probably revere more than anybody for saying all the right things, tried to play with the courts. So don't be surprised that some legislator from over in Albemarle who's not Thomas Jefferson trying to.
Well, Franklin Roosevelt tried to.
Yes.
Yeah, better example. Yeah, better example. Yeah. So much for the purity of the courts and the system.
We have two more questions, I think. Mary had a question?
If the judges who are here, if you choose to, I would like to hear from you on the question of selection or election. Do you have a preference or a comment on one way or the other? Anybody who wants to speak?
Well, I mean, I have gone through both election unsuccessfully and then the governor's appointment. But echoing what everyone said, there are just problems with each and every one. Like, you know, I'm sure a merit selection, even as few as 10 years ago, would be a good old boys club. I mean, let's face it.
Bingo.
And so whatever that club may be, however you mix it up, you're still going to have some politics in it. You're still going to have that kind of issue. So I think that's difficult. I wish that with judicial elections that people did have more information about us. And while it's true that we cannot say, oh, I would find this person guilty, or I would find this person not, or this is my philosophy, you know, certainly we can't do that. We would hope the public wouldn't want us to do that. But they can certainly find out, and there really is a lot of information out there about what our education, what our life experience, those kinds of things that inform our decisions. And life is too busy for people to go find that information out about the judges. We're fortunate if they find that information out about their Senate races, about their local races, and we're, you know, just not at the top of people's minds. So when they go vote, they're usually just looking at what's passed out at the polls, and so that makes it difficult too. I don't think they're the right answer.
And I agree with Judge Hewitt's statement about that generally. And I'm Ricky McCoy Mitchell, so I actually have been on the bench now almost 20 years. So I went through every single process they have talked about it. I went through appointment, I went through election, I went to partisanship and non-partisanship. I went to, because when at the time we started, and I have to always give a shout out to my hubby, because I think we forget how much what we do impacts our families and other people in our lives, and we never give them enough credit. So I try to make sure to do that, because he was right out there on the running back and forth, because we also at that time had to get the executive committee for the county and do a petition against it. So there's all kinds of things we actually do. And as everyone has spoken, there are problems with everything. But I would tell you at the very core, for me, it's really important to have our community input. Because it's the community that comes into the courts. Now, does that look like a better way of trying to educate our population more? Does that look like some commission later on that has a right mix? Because I get concerned about that merit selection when I look at our federal bench and what that really becomes. So there are problems with every piece of that. I think we underestimate, though, our community and its ability to want to know and to come out and learn about it. Now, I will agree there have been times when in the past judges were pretty much at the bottom of the list of what people think about, but now that so much has been going on and a lot of those decisions are last heard in the judiciary, they're hearing a lot more about it. While this is not any way near the capacity or the number of people who should be attending tonight, this is more than we have had previously in different events. So people do want to know. I wish, and I guess you didn't ask me that question when you were asking the panel, but in addition to having the judge, people know more about the judges, except for our judicial, except for our juvenile courts, and there's some issues about when people come in and how we do that. Our courts are open. If you want to see what a judge is like, is that right, Mr. Emery?
Yeah.
Judge Williamson, Mr. Vendry.
Misdemeanor district court is the best free entertainment in town.
But a judge is like, you can come to our courts. We invite folks to do that. We've invited and had meetings with our legislators. Because you may come in there one time and you think, okay, that judge is acting that way because I'm here. But there's no way we could do that every time people come into the court. You would learn a lot. And I invite you as citizens to come and observe, and I invite you to take some action. We need you in our court, especially with our young people and what's going on. And I could go on, but open it up. Make sure you heard that.
All right, so I am going to give what is probably going to be perceived as a dissenting opinion about this. Because, so I was appointed, and I've examined this, examined why people are uncertain about an appointed system. And at the root of it is, do you trust your leaders? Do you trust? The governor that appointed me was Jim Hunt. All right? So I went through a vetting process before he even interviewed me. The state senator had to recommend me, actually it was two, and then I had to go through, my qualifications. He interviewed me and said, okay, I think I can do this appointment. And the only other requirement was, you better not switch parties. We were joking about it. But then the next governor, I have to go back on my history. Then Martin. We've had some great governors in this state. And until the most recent national election, I would say we have usually selected very talented, intelligent people to be our leaders. And so that's the uncertainty and the uncomfortableness people have with the appointment process. We cannot trust our leaders now to be informed, intelligent, compassionate, empathetic, all those things. Because we've had Democratic governors who have appointed Republicans to the bench. You know, not sure we've had any Republican governors, but it just depended on what the time period was and what the statutes were, because when it was partisan elections, if a vacancy occurred, the governor was required to appoint someone who was the same member of that party, okay? But when it was nonpartisan, I do know of a couple of appointments that were made by Democratic governors to Superior Court vacancies and District Court vacancies without any concern about the party the person belonged to. So, you know, so I have that different experience with being appointed, plus, you know, I am a terrible politician. And the thought of me getting out there and shaking your hand and remembering your name and how many kids you have and blah, 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 and so forth just brings fear to me. And the last thing I'm going to say is, and someone mentioned it earlier when they were talking about PACs, but the thing that bothers me the most about having to campaign for a judicial seat is the fact that I have to go over here to Richard Vroonroot and ask him for $1,000. And I'll have to ask Lane Williamson for $1,000.
Well, you know what you get.
And that's right. So that's why I have to ask Mr. Emery for $5,000. You know, Mr. Williams. And then the very next day, Mr. Emery's going to come into my courtroom. And regardless of the fact that Mr. Emery knows I'm going to be fair, I'm going to be impartial, or any of that thing, you're going to think, you gave him $5,000. How is it possible that you can't be biased in his favor? You know, and so that's the thing that gnaws at me about the election process, and the fact that more and more so money is coming into that system. And there's Judge Gonzalez.
You've heard from all these district court judges, and like Judge McCoy Mitchell, I've been on the bench now for 24 plus years, and I have gone through the appointment process and the election process. I've lost elections and won elections. When I started out, the Bar Association in our state has for years been pushing for the appointment of judges. Years, I mean, probably almost the time that I've been licensed.
45 years.
As long as I've been licensed. And the Black Lawyers Association has always resisted that idea because they felt that under an appointed process, Black lawyers would not be appointed as judges across this state. And you've heard some of the history about how it is now that we have more Black people as judges across the state. I used to think, and I thought because Charlotte was this urbane community and it was inclusive and it was interested in being forward-thinking, that Black people here would have an opportunity to be appointed. In other parts of the state, it was my concern that may not be the case. And in other parts of the state, there's not the population that would support the election of Black judges. So I was torn between appointment and election. Although I came down on the side of appointment, I really thought at least here it would be possible. Recently, with all of this that we've seen, not just 717, but some of the other things that the legislature has done, I have gone back to the side saying we need to continue to elect our judges. I have felt like this legislature has waged war and is waging war on the judiciary. Mr. Vinroot is right. The Democrats were in power for over a century. They did the same thing, and I understand that and I accept it. But it seems to me that two wrongs don't make a right. And if the Democrats were wrong for over 100 years, the Republicans don't have to be wrong for 50 to get back at us. One other point I wanted to make about this redistricting, because you have talked about splitting of the county. The Superior Court judges hold court within a division. So while we are elected from a county or a district, I don't hold court just in Mecklenburg County. I'm assigned to court in Gaston, Cleveland, Lincoln, Caldwell, Burke, and Catawba. So we have a 7-county division. Under this new proposal, and the state has 8 divisions currently. Under this new proposal, they would reduce the number of divisions from 8 to 5. That creates a larger geographic district for the Superior Court judges to travel with. When I first became a Superior Court judge, we had a travel allowance. Then as the economy tanked, the travel allowance went away, so we didn't get that. We do get paid mileage. If we have to spend the night somewhere that's far enough away, the state pays $71 in tax for a hotel room. So you're looking for the cheapest hotel that you can find. Under this new proposal, that's safe. Yeah. Under this new proposal, our division is the 5th division. It would start at Mecklenburg and go to Tennessee. I think that there would be an impact in the number of candidates, the kind of candidates that you see. Women who have young families are not going to want to travel to Macon and Clay and those counties where they don't come home every night. Where I travel now, I come home every night even though I may have to go 75 miles a day and then make that 150 round trip. But that's possible. But if I were assigned to court west of Buncombe County, I would not be driving home every night. And I did not become a Superior Court judge until my children were in high school, so that my husband and they, at least one of them had a driver's license, and they could manage it. If I had children in elementary school, I would not have been willing to do that. And I think it would reduce the number of females who are willing to take this job. That's the 5th division, that's Mecklenburg, Tennessee. In the 1st division, which is in the northeast part of the state, they also have a tremendous geographic area that they would have to cover. So that's another factor that I think needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. And in closing, I would like to say, as the North Carolina Voters for Clean Election Coalition, we got into this because we very much supported judicial public financing. And getting back to what you were saying about the money issue, frankly, when we passed judicial public financing, we got it for Superior Court and Court of Appeals. Our long-term goals were to get it all the way down to the trial court judges, because we did not believe that, under this, constitutional mandate, if we elected judges, and if we were going to have to do that, we didn't want our judges to have to go ask our lawyers for, $1,000, $5,000, because, nobody wants a system of justice built like that. And so, these are the questions, we've been grappling with and discussing, judicial public financing was what we still believe is the right answer if we're going to be electing our judges. And now these questions are coming forth regarding merit selection and legislative appointment. And, these are all good questions to be asking, a debate to be having, because these are what our policy leaders are discussing right now. I want to thank you all for coming and being a part of this panel discussion. I'm sure if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. If you want to be more involved and talk about these issues, please come talk to me. And let's give a round of applause and thank our panelists.